I'm Laurie Orth, and I'm a music and STEAM educator. I write songs for elementary and middle school students about space exploration and rockets. I'm a non-traditional educator, and I teach part-time as an independent contractor for the Jesse Norman School of the Arts in Augusta, Georgia. I'm part of their community outreach program, and I teach music at a Title I school called Challenge Prep Academy. Dr. Amy Lowitz is a scientist in the astronomy department at the University of Arizona. She works on the Event Horizon Telescope, EHT, a global array of radio telescopes that work together to image and study supermassive black holes. Amy designs new hardware and systems to make EHT observing more efficient. She also oversees EHT observing at 3 of the EHT telescope sites: the South Pole Telescope, the submillimeter telescope, and the Kitt Peak 12-meter telescope. Amy and I have had several Zoom calls to learn about each other's work. Amy has shared about her work with the South Pole Telescope and her activities with the Event Horizon Telescope. She also very graciously suggested that I travel to Arizona to see the 12-meter telescope at Kitt Peak, as it's a lot easier to get to Arizona than to travel to the South Pole. Polar STEAM accepted my travel proposal and supported my travel to meet Amy in person. Even though our collaboration was listed as virtual, we made the best of it with some in-person field work. Here is some of that travel vlog. Amy and I had a delightful first meeting. We visited, I got to hear about what she does. I said out of the blue, "So, Amy, are you a musician?" And she said, "I play the violin." And she told me all about how at the South Pole they have a music room and it's filled with people's instruments that they take and leave. They know that they're going to leave them. So she said there's a bunch of ukuleles, there's a bunch of guitars, keyboard, there's a bass, an upright bass, there's, I think she said there's an electric cello. Did I remember that right? There's a tuba, a marimba, and violins. And she said there's 3 violins and it sounds like 2 of them are broken and one of them is almost broken, but she's managed to be able to play it. In April 2024, Amy invited me to participate in one of her Zoom calls that she had with her telescope operators who are working on the Event Horizon Telescope. They had satellite coverage and we were able to have a real Zoom call with the operators at the South Pole. Check out how cold it was. Those were real live shots from their video cameras. I've also been working on a musical resource that's part of my Polar STEAM work, and I've written the music, and Amy's going to provide all of the lyrics as our subject matter expert, and these were some early drafts. Next, it was time to put on my Polar STEAM shoes and head to Arizona. Amy works at the University of Arizona, and that's where a couple of the telescopes are for the Event Horizon Telescope. And I headed out to Tucson, and boy, was it different than Georgia. It was hot, it was July, and yeah, it was beautiful. But it was definitely something to get used to, the altitude and the dryness. And I've learned that the South Pole is also very high in altitude. Check that out, 110 degrees. Day 1, all set and ready to go. We went to a balloon hangar where one of Amy's colleagues is building a balloon that will have a telescope inside it, and it will be released at the South Pole. I got to see all of the behind the scenes stuff. Here's an apparatus that's going to hold the telescope, and that's going to hold the mirror, and this was his balloon hangar. Some beautiful artwork there. And here's some pictures of a similar telescope and balloon. There's a picture that it took of Antarctica, and more pictures of it and its solar panels. It was amazing to see this up close. And then we hit the road and headed towards Kitt Peak. And there's a first glimpse of the telescopes on top of Kitt Peak. And there's the turnoff. And this is built on land from the Tohono O'odham Nation. This is tribal land, And we learned about how tribal elders spoke with the scientists back in the 1950s to negotiate having their tribal land used for this observatory. I did notice a lot of burned and charred trees, and Amy told me that 3 years ago there was a terrible fire that affected a lot of Kitt Peak, and it got very close to the 12-meter telescope that we were getting ready to see, but it did not burn it, which is a miracle. And here is a close-up of one of the light fixtures next to the telescope that did get burned. You can see it's all melted inside there, and it didn't torch the telescope. So here's what it looks like going to work inside a great big telescope. Just another day in the life of Amy. There's the mazer, the timekeeping unit, all sorts of interesting views. That was looking up towards the receiver cabin. Here was the sliding door that opened up the telescope to the sky. More pictures looking up at the receiver cabin. And here we are inside the receiver cabin, and you can see all of the cabling and networking that hooks it up to all of its data receiving equipment. Lots of cables. Here's another cool view. Notice the ladybugs, and there are the stairs for the receiver cabin. They were a little bit scary. I was proud of myself for climbing all the way up there and being brave. The telescope operator did open up the observation deck, and we got to climb up there. It was beautiful to look out, but boy was it hot. It was about 20 degrees hotter in the sun than when we were standing in the shade. And back behind us is the 4-meter telescope that we're going to go look at later in the day. Next, we headed over to the visitor center, where we got to have a tour of the 4-meter telescope. And in the background here is the solar telescope. It is currently not in use, but it has been in years past. Here's the big 4-meter telescope, and here's a picture from inside the telescope looking back at the 12-meter. That's where we were across the way. And this is the inside of the 4-meter telescope. It's a huge thing, and once again, more views across the landscape. This is the observatory, and that peak in the background is a sacred place for the Tohono O'odham tribe. Here's more information from the 4-meter telescope, and here we are at the end of day 1. Waking up the next day for day 2 at University of Arizona. I did get to tour a portion of the campus, and it was about 96 degrees at 8 in the morning. Here is where Amy has her lab in the Stewart Observatory building. This is one of the data collector hard drives, multiple hard drives. This is a project that Amy's working on that will help automate some of the checks that she has to do before the Event Horizon Telescope does its 2-week campaign. On the wall, they have a piece of the dish. Here is the telescope at Mount Graham, also used in the Event Horizon Telescope. And here's a picture of the South Pole Telescope.
Spread out across the globe, telescopes working together as one, measuring black holes far beyond the sun. 12 telescopes spread out across the globe, telescopes collect baby, baby, pictures of the universe. Baby, baby, pictures of the universe. Light from the Big Bang. 14 years outside now, zipping up her parka, walking to the telescope in Antarctica. South Pole Telescope stares at black holes while Amy's in Antarctica. Let's all go to the...
Sunrise on day 3. What a lot of work we got done on our resource. Here's some pictures of all of the notes that I took all over the music. And next steps, head home and start thinking about wrapping up our resource. It was an incredible trip. I loved every minute of it, and I'm so grateful that Amy suggested it and that Polar Steam agreed to fund it. And here I was leaving Tucson and just so happened to fly over the University of Arizona. I saw the campus and I thought, oh my goodness, there's the airport, and look down, there's the campus. There's the stadium and the walkways, and there's Amy down there in one of those buildings. It was a remarkable trip. And I was so happy to look out the window and see Atlanta. Look at that beautiful green humidity down below. I missed the humidity. Next steps are to get into a recording studio and make some professional recordings of our song and work to get it out into the hands of music educators and STEM and STEAM educators so they can learn more about Polar Steam and the Event Horizon Telescope and the South Pole Telescope. Thanks so much for a great trip.